I'm Alan Matisow, Associate Director of the Baker Institute, and I'm very pleased to welcome everybody to tonight's special event. All of us in some way are a part of history, even if we're in the far margins just watching it pass by. But occasionally, an average citizen will be at the right place and the right time and make history. And that's the case of our speaker today, Staff Sergeant Eric Maddox. Sergeant Maddox grew up in a small town near Tulsa, played high school football, went to the University of Oklahoma, became the #1 Sooners football fan, joined a fraternity, and wondered what he was going to do with his life and didn't know when he got out, except he wanted to serve his country. So he joined the Army, he joined the paratroopers actually, became a Ranger, which is no small accomplishment in itself. Decided he might want to study languages and chose Mandarin Chinese. Spent 18 months studying Chinese and another 8 months taking a course of study in how to be an interrogator. Of course, at that time, which was 1999, so far as I know, there were no prisoners speaking Mandarin Chinese that we had to interrogate, but if there were, I guarantee you, Sergeant Maddox was ready. In 2001, after Afghanistan, the invasion of Afghanistan, he was detailed to the Defense Intelligence Agency, and in 2003, there was a real big war in Iraq. Not that Afghanistan was not important in itself. And he found himself in a place where Mandarin Chinese was really not going to be useful to him, in the airport in Baghdad as an interrogator. Spent 4 days there, and they detailed him to Tikrit, which was the hometown of Saddam Hussein, and in the very heart of the Sunni insurgency. He worked with a the elite special operations unit that went after what they call in the military high-value targets, valuable targets on track of the insurgency. He spent 5 months there, and fairly early in his stay there, he realized that he might be the only man in Iraq who could be on the trail of blacklist #1, the ace of spades in the deck of cards that the Defense Intelligence Agency prepared with the pictures of the most highly valued targets in Iraq. The ace of spades was Saddam Hussein. So he spent 5 months there interrogating 300 prisoners, and as he reports in this book, he never employed torture, and in fact thinks it's a waste of time because it doesn't work. He also found out that everything he learned about being an interrogator was not of much use because they trained him for the war that was in the past. And he had to rely on his own intuition, and he admits that he had a considerable amount of it for this task. And in the end, he got Saddam. He tells this story in a book called Mission Blacklist #1. Now, if you like a good detective story, and you like a page-turning thriller, I recommend this book. I couldn't put it down until I finished. And you will be glad to know that over in that table there, we not only have this book, but Sergeant Maddox will sign it. So I'd like you to welcome to our platform today Sergeant Maddox, who served his country honorably and well, in the company of some of the bravest soldiers in the world, in the most dangerous part of Iraq, and who in the end got his man, and incidentally made some history.
Thank you very much, Dr. Matisow. You actually didn't have to stop. I was just going to sit there and let you go on. My name is Eric Maddox, and I'm currently working for the Department of Defense as a civilian. I want to thank all of you for coming out here and joining me this evening to talk about my experience in Iraq in 2003. And if you so choose to buy a book, I would love to be able to sign it for you, but if not, maybe I can just tell you a good war story. I also want to thank you, Ambassador, for joining us this evening. As the doctor said, in July of 2003, I was sent to Iraq to join a special operations task force to hunt down the high-value targets. And they had all been developed from the deck of cards, Saddam being number one and all the way down. What he didn't emphasize, though, was at the time, I'd never done an interrogation, ever. I had done some in training in 1999. I passed interrogation school the same as I passed ranger school, and that was by the hair of my teeth. So I wasn't sure of my abilities, but I was very excited to get the opportunity to go and serve. And that was my main goal. When I showed up to Iraq in July of 2003, the mission of the interrogator for the war was to determine the guilt or innocence of the prisoners who had been captured. Now, we were going after low-level insurgents, we were going after former Baathists, we were going specifically after the high-value targets, but all the information going to them was being led by informants. They're being run by case officers. Those case officers would get targets, grab prisoners, and hand them to individuals like me and say, determine whether they're guilty or innocent, which was fine with me because I really didn't know what it meant to be an interrogator. So the first couple of days I was there, they needed a guy, one interrogator to go to Tikrit. And since I was Nick the new guy, and everyone thought Saddam was in Baghdad, they thought he was in Syria, they said none of the experienced guys wanted to go. I said, send the new guy. So I didn't mind. Put me on a plane, had a bag with a change of clothes, and they shot me up to Tikrit. Went out with this team of amazing special operations soldiers, did this raid, got shut up by our own guys accidentally, and for me, it was that true rush of being outside the wire with a small group of guys, and we went on a location that we had no business going because we just had gone to the wrong place. The information had not led to the wrong place. So I had opportunities to talk to this team, and they said, that's the problem. We have the greatest soldiers on the planet. We've got the combat power, and we've got the determination. We don't know where to go. And we're not fighting conventional forces. We're not fighting tanks and individuals when we capture them are wearing uniforms with the chain of command. These are civilians who live amongst the innocent people, amongst the children and the women, and at night or in a very small portion of their life, they're fighting against us, and we don't know how to find them. And I didn't know how I could help them, but I asked them if I could stay, and they didn't see the problem. I didn't eat much, and I just stayed in my side of the bed, and I told them, I'll just be your interrogator. So they said, you know what, we'll give it a shot a little bit. You got a couple of days. So from now on, starting in July, I just started interrogating, and I felt sorry for those first prisoners that I talked to, because as nice as we were to each other and all the rapport that we built, we talked all night and the next day about everything, because I really didn't care if they were guilty or innocent, and I would have loved to it if they would tell me exactly where, the other insurgent members were, but they weren't going to, and I didn't know how to get it out of them. But what I was trying to learn how to do was to ask questions, figure out this culture. I was a Chinese specialist. There were so many things I would be embarrassed to tell you that I did not know about Iraq. Quite frankly, I didn't know Saddam had bodyguards. I just wasn't following it. When everybody else saw the deck of cards, I was studying the deck of cards on the way over to Iraq just to get a feel of what was going on. So every day, I would talk to whoever they brought in, get to know them, get to know the culture, get to know the lay of the land, and get to know what it was like to be an Iraqi at war. And I did this, and there were no expectations of what I would find. I tried to determine guilt or innocence of these prisoners, but quite frankly, I was a little cog in the wheel of a prisoner's life cycle. Team enjoyed the fact that I would talk to anybody, so they decided to keep me around. Now, about halfway through my tour, something started to unfold. Of all these hundreds of prisoners I spoke with, there was an insurgency element that started to unfold. And it was individuals that we weren't going after. The United States government was not looking for. They were nowhere on the deck of cards. And quite frankly, they could walk straight by 1,000 US soldiers and no one would have ever cared. And what I realized was that there were dozens of small pockets of insurgents into Crete. And at the top, they believed they were working for these 4 brothers, same family, who had been inner circle bodyguards for Saddam. Now, while I was questioning a bunch of Iraqis about unimportant stuff, I realized that I learned about Saddam's bodyguards, and I realized the importance of it and determined which ones had been killed, which ones had been captured, which ones had left the country. But there was this group of 4 brothers that had not been killed, hasn't been captured, and yet they hadn't left the country. And all these insurgents were reporting to them. So my theory was that if Saddam trusted his bodyguards the most, that's who he would trust if he was still alive. And of all the insurgent activity that's going on, why would it be that Saddam's bodyguards, who should be on the run, who should be away, hiding, why would they be running the activity unless they were getting orders directly from Saddam? So forget about the deck of cards and the former regime. All I need to find is the guy who can take us to Saddam. That's all that matters. So I presented this theory to my team leader, who at the time we'd gone on several dozens of raids, and really we hadn't found anyone of significant importance. I explained to him, I can get you these bodyguards if we go up the bottom, if we go up the social network, if we go amongst all these citizens who are sitting at home innocently. These bodyguards are hiding amongst them, and I think we can track them down. And that's what we started to do. Starting in October, we started to identify friends, family members, drinking buddies, drivers of these 4 bodyguards. And the beautiful part about it was that they weren't wanted. They were involved because the bodyguards running, if they had been running an insurgency under Saddam, would need them to drive for them and support them, so they had knowledge. So it allowed us to go and get them. So on November 8th, 2003, one of my informants came in and says, I know you're looking for these 4 brothers. I know exactly where one of the brothers is. It's 2 hours out west in a town called Haditha. My team leader, his name was Bam Bam at the time. It's obviously a nickname. I'm not sure I know his real name. Only goes by Bam Bam. Said, you know what? Let's give the plan a shot. This is our first attempt. Went out west, grabbed our guy. His name was Radman Ibrahim. Radman was one of the 4 brothers. We had to fly helicopters. Radman had a heart attack during the flight and died before I ever got a chance to speak with him. Along with Radman, we captured his 18-year-old son. Told Bam Bam, I'm sorry about Radman. I need to talk to his son. Brought his son back. Again, interrogating. Didn't want any information about his dad. I had his dad. Unfortunately, he was dead. But I needed the other 3 brothers. Young man told me, yes. About his uncles. Unknowingly, what he told me, though, were the 3 best friends of one of the other brothers. He mentioned a man who was a driver. His name was Bassem Latif. He mentioned, and again, you don't have to remember these names, but they were extremely important in this hunt. We had a driver named Bassem Latif. We had a businessman named Abu Dris, and we also had a cement partnership with a guy named Thamar al-Assi. So at this time, I went back to Bam Bam and said, listen, I know you don't know those bodyguards, but now we need to go lower. I need to go to these best friends. Do you have one? Yes. I can find us Abu Idris, the business partner. Went to the house, raided the house of Abu Idris, brought him and his 2 sons back. Abu Idris, I don't know Muhammad Ibrahim. I have no idea who he is. Finally interrogated the sons. One of the sons broke and said, yeah, my father, he's not going to tell you. We're not friends with Muhammad Ibrahim. We're like his servants. We're not business partners. We run houses that he hides in. So at this point, went back to Bam Bam and said, hey, I think we're onto something. This Muhammad Ibrahim, this bodyguard, I think he's on the run, and I think he's important. Let's keep going. We got a business partner. I need the driver. The driver's name was a man named Bassem Latif. Now at this point, Bam Bam says to me, we can't do it. We're too low. You've got to get us someone with some pull around here. I said, well, I know we can set up a meeting with Bassem Latif. What I'd learned through interviews and interrogations was that this driver was the cousin of the chief of police for the entire city of Tikrit. Now the problem was, at this point, the chief of police for Tikrit is a Sunni in the Sunni triangle. To be the chief of police, the mayor of Tikrit, you've got to be our friend, whereas every other Sunni is not. Every other Sunni wants the mayor of Tikrit dead because he's friends with the Americans. The mayor of Tikrit had a bodyguard who had kept him alive for the first 6 months of this war. That bodyguard's cousin was Bassem Latif, the guy I wanted us to go arrest. So by having Bam Bam and the team arrest this driver, we're essentially destroying the only Sunni friend the United States military had in the whole country. So I made a proposal to Bam Bam. I said, I need to interview him. I need you to watch. If he's lying, you know what he can tell us. He was the driver for Muhammad Ibrahim, the man I think can take us to Saddam. Listen to me and interview him. If you know he's lying, I need you to arrest him. And he says, let's do it. Let's set up the interview. But the chief security guard's going to be there. So if I need to know, I need to see him in the line, he needs to see him in the line. I conducted the interview. Within an hour, I was able to get Bassem Latif, the driver, turned around in his lies enough that Bam Bam trusted me. This was December 1st, 2003. I don't want to give away the end of the book, but December 13th, 2003 was when Saddam's captured. December 1st, 2003, we conduct this interview, getting caught in enough lies. Bam Bam comes to me and says, all right, let's go. We're taking him. I need the targets and I need them now. So we arrested Bassem Latif, the chief of police, extremely upset, and we're on the clock. Went back to the house, started interrogating Bassem. First had to convince him that he's no longer a free man. He told us that because his cousin was the chief of police of security, that makes him a friend of ours. And I first had to explain to him, you're not going anywhere. And we went debate back and forth. I explained to him his relationship with Muhammad Ibrahim. He denied it initially. Several hours later, we finally got to the point, and he just kind of looks at me and he said, you don't get it, do you? And I said, I know Muhammad Ibrahim's running this insurgency. And he just kind of laughed at me and he goes, you don't have any idea what you're talking about. And I said, I want to know what Muhammad Ibrahim does. And he looks at me and he goes, he takes all orders from the president. And I knew he was talking about Saddam Hussein. And so I kind of caught my breath and said, what do you mean, all orders? And Boston said, I was his driver. I drove him all over the country. I had $250,000 in my trunk at all time. He gets orders from Saddam. He's running the insurgency throughout this country. Boston looks at me and he goes, you Americans, you never found Saddam because you weren't looking for the one guy could help you find him. And that was Muhammad Ibrahim. So at this point, I went to Bam Bam and I said, well, the good news is Boston broke. Muhammad Ibrahim can take us to Saddam. He says, well, where is he? I said, I don't know, but we're going to keep looking. So between Bassem and I, we came up with 5 locations we thought Muhammad Ibrahim could be. One of which was one of Muhammad Ibrahim's girlfriends, a brother, the person that Bassem Latif, the driver, thought would be the new driver for Muhammad Ibrahim, and some other locations. This was December 4th. We hit all 5 houses, and we found a girlfriend, a guy who might be a driver, a brother, all asleep, sitting completely innocent at their home, and no Muhammad Ibrahim. One of the houses we went to, though, was one of the 3 friends of Muhammad Ibrahim. Now, we'd already gotten Abu Dris. We'd already gotten Bassem Latif, the driver. There was one more friend. His name was Thamer Al-Asi. So we did find Thamer, and we also brought his 2 20-year-old sons in. Thamer wouldn't give me anything. I knew he worked with Muhammad Ibrahim. I knew he wouldn't say a word. Talked to his son, and his son finally admitted. He says, yeah, I own the cement shop. Muhammad Ibrahim's running the insurgency out of the shop. Well, where is he? He says, well, ever since you guys arrested Bassem Latif, he left. He went somewhere in Samara. So he gave me the name. He said, the guy who's running the insurgency in Samara is a guy named Sabah. I can give you his house. And I'm sitting here with Bassem, who's listening in now. We're all buddies. We're sitting around. I'm like, okay, Bassem, do you know this Sabah? And he's like, yeah, I know him. I don't know where he lives. And this kid's like, oh, I can take you to Sabah's. But Muhammad Ibrahim's running 24/7 with another gentleman. His name's Muhammad Hadair. Second Muhammad. He goes, they're always together. Bassem looks at me and goes, I know where that Muhammad Hadair lives. It's a couple of blocks away from Sabah. It's in Samara. And then the kid says, and Muhammad Ibrahim has a rental house somewhere in Samara. I don't know where it's at. Bassem looks at me and he goes, no, but Muhammad Hadair will know where that rental house is at. So, December 7th, 2003, we got it set up. We're first going to have this kid take us to Sabah, the guy who's running the insurgency in Samara. I'm going to have that kid. I'm going to ask him, will you please take us to Muhammad Hadair's? We're going to go to Muhammad Hadair's, just a couple of blocks over. When we get him, he's going to take us to Muhammad Ibrahim, who's got a rental house. And then Muhammad Ibrahim's going to take us to Saddam, and we'll be done for Christmas. Well, you got to have a plan. Not saying the plan's going to work, but that was the plan. So we go to the house of Sabah. We hit it, no Sabah. We got his brother. Immediately talked to his brother, and his brother admits, yeah, my brother works for Muhammad Ibrahim, and he's got a rental house, and I'll take you to it right now. So we skipped the Muhammad Hadair piece. We didn't need that now. Grabbed everything from Sabah's house because we didn't have time to search, threw it in the truck, and went straight to the rental house. Got to the rental house and found Muhammad Ibrahim's 18-year-old son. No Muhammad Ibrahim. But at least we're on the right track. So we grabbed the son and we grabbed Sabah's brother, and we come back, and I'm about to interrogate Sabah's brother, and I get a call on the radio. And they say, hey, you need to come over here. I'm thinking, oh, I've done something wrong. And I'm like, am I in trouble? I'm like, just get over here. So I go back to the house, and they're like, there was a safe at Sabah's house. We didn't have time to open it. When his brother said he was going to take us to the rental house, we just threw it in the truck. We just now opened it, and there's $1.9 million in there. So that was good. At that point, now the team agreed we're on the right track and that we do need Muhammad Ibrahim. So we changed our operations in that all the prisoners, Bassem Latif, Thamer Al-Asi's son, now Sabah's brother, we didn't send him back to the prison. We made him a little hotel in the house, and the team of operators did 24/7 guards. Guys had all the cigarettes, all the coffee, tea they wanted, and I never went back to my room again. I moved in a bed with them, and we did 24-hour talking, trying to get our next targets. Now, talking with Sabah, who was our buddy now, he crumbled. The poor kid was getting married in 4 days and wanted to do anything possible to get out of U.S. custody and to his soon-to-be wife. So he would tell us everything that he could. And he, between him and Bassem Latif and Thamra Al-Assi's son and all these names you probably, but all these gentlemen start talking. Well, I'm out of places to go. So we're kind of, what do they like to do for hobbies and this and that? And Lawai, the brother of Sabah, said they go fishing. They always go fishing. And they, the two Muhammads, Muhammad Adair and Muhammad Ibrahim, had a farm with a little shack on it that was about 5 kilometers outside of Samarra. And they would fish in the Tigris River, and then 50 meters inside the bank was the farm, was the pond. They would throw the fish in there. And one of the things that we learned from talking to people who knew Saddam was that he loved this particular prepared fish called mazgoof. And from what I learned is they take the fish and they cut it open and pack it with salt, wrap it up over a spit, and Saddam had to have it every night. So if you're Muhammad Ibrahim and you're having to deal with Saddam Hussein, who's probably a little grumpy because he lost his country, what a better way to keep him happy than to have him get his food? So it made sense. Let's go to the fish farm. So I tell our analysts and I tell Bam Bam, there's a fish farm, got the location. Oh yeah, by the way, we skipped Muhammad Adair's house. We went straight from Sabah to the rental house, but we skipped Muhammad Adair's. Great, we'll hit them both. So the night of December 7th, we're all set. We're gonna raid Muhammad Adair's, and the team in Baghdad is going to the fish farm. Now the Baghdad team that we report to, so this is a 12-man group of guys I'm living with. So obviously, that's not the top of the chain of command. I mean, I'm a staff sergeant. I was the bottom of the barrel. Bam Bam's a major. So in the big picture, it's a pretty low group of guys. Baghdad had thought we were crazy since September. They really didn't care because they had the junior interrogator and there was no high-value targets in Tikrit, so just keep yourself busy and don't kill anybody. Well, when you get $1.9 billion, they start to want to get involved. Now they don't want to miss out on the fun. So they're going to do the fish farm raid. So that night, we go to Muhammad Adair's, and they don't go to the fish farm because on their satellite, they couldn't see anything. There was no fishermen there. So we go to Muhammad Adair's, and there's probably 40 adult women and 60 to 80 small children. And when we talked to them, every woman was the wife of Sabah, the wife of Muhammad Adair, the wife of Abu Sufyan, the martyred brother of Muhammad Adair, the children of all these individuals we'd been going after. So this was the nest of all the family members whose spouses have had to flee. But there wasn't a grown male there. So that didn't do us any good. And then we find out nobody hit the fish farm. So we come back, we reorganize and say, listen, Bam Bam, we got to go to the fish farm. He says, okay, tomorrow we'll do it. Which, at this point, it's the last day I'm going to be in Tikrit. I'm on a 6-month tour, and my tour is up. Which was okay, because they were going to be at the fish farm, and we'd put in a satellite feed all day, and there were 2 men at the fish farm, and we were watching them all day. They weren't going anywhere, and we knew we had our guys. So the plan was, Bam Bam and the team was going to go to the fish farm, grab Muhammad Ibrahim, Muhammad Adair, come pick me up in a helicopter, fly to Baghdad. I was leaving, I had to leave out of Baghdad, so be it. That night, hit the fish farm, and it's neither Muhammad Ibrahim, it's not Muhammad Adair. So they just took him to Baghdad. I stayed there and was told, tomorrow you're going to leave. Do you have any more targets? And I said, no, I don't have any more. That's all I've got. So the next day I left, and I had asked my friend, who was an interrogator, where the fishermen were back in Baghdad, our headquarters. I said, can you keep the fishermen? I got to talk to them. There's no way my trail ends here. So I go back to Baghdad on December 9th, and I start interviewing the fishermen. And I brought Bassem Latif with us. I mean, he's the driver for the most heavily insurgent leader in the whole country, and he was a big help to me. And I'd made a promise to Bassem: you get us Muhammad Ibrahim, I'll get Saddam. You go free, all sins forgiven. So he wanted to go with me. So we brought Bassem with us. We get back to Baghdad. I start interrogating these two fishermen, interrogating them and talking to them. And finally, it was literally, I think it was a 10-hour interrogation. And one of the fishermen finally said, yeah, I'm actually cousins with Muhammad Hidayar. And he's with Muhammad Ibrahim all the time. Muhammad Hidayar and I have a mutual aunt and uncle in Baghdad. They may be there. So I get the team in Baghdad, try to sell them on this plan. They called the team in Tikrit and said, yeah, we know Eric, go, keep going. So the night of December 12th at midnight, we hit the house of the cousins of Muhammad Hidayar, who supposedly is a friend of Muhammad Ibrahim that no one else is looking for in the entire country. Got a phone call at 2 o'clock in the morning. This is December 13th. My flight leaves at 8 o'clock in the morning, December 13th, like it or not. I'm an Army Staff Sergeant. A lot of people ask me, oh, Eric, come on, you could have extended your stay. Anybody been in the military before? There's got to be, Staff Sergeants don't adjust their date of departure for anything. It can be adjusted, but not by me. So at 2 o'clock in the morning, we get a phone call. They said, we did the raid on Muhammad Hidayar's house. We got Muhammad Hidayar. We got 3 other guys. Did you get Muhammad Ibrahim? No, we didn't get Muhammad Ibrahim. I'm thinking, where is this guy? Okay, bring him back in here. And I told Bassem, I said, Bassem, just sit in the back. I don't know what we have here, but we got 6 hours to figure out where Muhammad Ibrahim is. I started the interrogations. Went on a couple hours. First couple hours, Muhammad Hidayar is like, Muhammad Ibrahim? I don't know who you're talking about. Muhammad Hidayar? I don't know who you're talking about. He wouldn't admit to being himself. After a couple hours of catching him in his lies, Bassem helped me out. He finally says, yeah, I do know Muhammad Ibrahim. He was at the house last night. And I'm thinking, we just missed this guy. And he finally explains, he goes, no, he was at the house when y'all did the raid. And I'm thinking, oh, he's one of the other 3 guys. The Baghdad team don't know what they're looking for. They don't know him like we know him. Like my team would have known him if they found him. So I ran back there, and there's 3 prisoners with their hoods on, and I lifted one hood, and the other hood. I lifted the other hood, and I recognized him. I knew exactly what we were supposed to look like. And I said, you're Muhammad Ibrahim. I've been waiting to meet you. And he said, blah, blah, blah. And my interpreter said, yeah. He said he's been waiting to meet you too. So at this point, it's 6 o'clock in the morning. I have 2 hours. Take him back to the interrogation room, and I start interrogating. And I explain to him, you're taking me to Saddam. That's the only way I'm helping you out. I've been going after you for 4 months. I've gone after every single family member. I've got 40 of them in prison because of you. You've got them involved in this insurgency, and you're the one that's going to get them out. You take me to Saddam, I don't need those 40 people. You take me to Saddam, I'm not going after the other 20 people that are also in your family that are also working in that insurgency. And he says, I don't know where he's at. And I say, yeah, you do. You know where he's at, and you're going to take us. He goes, I don't know where he's at. And it was literally that much of a conversation for 2 straight hours. I couldn't go around the back end, or I couldn't manipulate or trick. I had to just explain to him over and over again, this is what I got, this is what you're going to do. Well, finally, at 7:45, my buddy Lee comes in and is like, we got to go. We were getting on a plane with an admiral going to Doha, Qatar. And what he exactly told me was, hey, Staff Sergeant, admirals don't wait on Staff Sergeants. Let's go. So told Lee, I said, listen, I haven't packed yet. Let me run. I got to pack up. Pick me up in 15 minutes. So I run, and I'm packing up my stuff. Well, before I leave, I had to deal with Muhammad Ibrahim. And so I had to put him away, and I didn't know what to do. I knew he could do it, but I didn't know how to prepare him for the future. And I told him, I said, listen, I'm the only person that knows what you can do. I'm the only person that knows you can take us to Saddam. No one else is going to come talk to you again. You're going to be a prisoner they know as insurgent leader, and you are going to die an old man in prison. The only way you're going to help yourself is taking us to Saddam. I don't know where he's at. I said, I know you do. And when you decide you're going to take us to Saddam, you're going to beat on your cell because no one else is going to come to you. Do you understand me? You need to make them know you're going to do it, or no one will come talk to you again. He said, I don't know where he's at. I said, yeah, you do. I took him back to the cell, and I ran, started packing up my stuff. My buddy Lee comes and picks me up, and we're driving to the airport. And he's like, yeah, you got your guy. That's Muhammad. I was like, yeah, it's great. That's the guy I've been looking for this whole time. And Lee said, what'd you do to that guy? I didn't do anything to him. Why? He said, you got to hear him in that prison. He goes, that guy's going crazy. He's beating the hell out of that door. So I obviously was shocked. And I told Lee, I said, just stall the plane. Just give me a few minutes. Tell him I'm late. And I jumped out, ran back, grabbed my interpreter, went in there and said, it's you and me. Let's go. And he goes, I want Paul Bremer. I was like, there is no Paul Bremer. Paul Bremer doesn't know who you are. I know I'm the one that knows who you can do. I will help your family. You have to take us to Saddam. He goes, there needs to be a plan. I said, the plan is between you and me. And he finally looks at me and he goes, you want to go? He goes, let's go. Right now, you and me, let's go. And I said, he said, he'll be there, let's go. Where will he be? He said, he'll be at the house of a man named Qais Naim Jassim. He's south of Tikrit, in a half a kilometer inside the river. So at this point, I literally had just a few minutes. We drew the sketch. Good map, detailed sketch, and I told him, he's got to be there, you get nothing. He said, he'll be there. Gave the map to the analyst and the other interrogator. They didn't know me. They didn't know what we were doing. Heck, I hadn't done anything in the last 48 hours other than sit there until 2 o'clock in the morning after this raid. I tell them, I know you don't know who I am. I've been in Tikrit this whole time. Please call Tikrit. Call that team. Ask for Bam Bam and tell them we got Muhammad Ibrahim. He's going to take us to Saddam. And these guys are like, okay, whatever. Great. So I went and caught the flight with the admiral of our task force to Doha, Qatar. Flight lands, and there's a mob that gets the admiral. Takes him up. He comes back and is like, what the hell's going on? Sir, last night we got Muhammad Ibrahim, and he will take us to Saddam. Okay. I'm turning the plane around. We're gassing up. I'm going straight back. You stay here. You got to give a brief. And I'm like, oh, no. They flew back. 2000, December 13th. They took Muhammad Ibrahim to Tikrit, to Bam Bam and the team. Bam Bam and the team, along with the team in Baghdad, took Muhammad Ibrahim, did a raid just south of Tikrit, about 5 kilometers. Were there for about an hour, did a sweep, could not find him. Bam Bam finally went to Muhammad Ibrahim and said, where is he? I took you, he's here. Where is he? We can't find him. Muhammad Ibrahim goes up to Qais Naim Jassim, starts arguing with him that you show him, because Muhammad Ibrahim didn't want to actually do the final deed. So as he's yelling at Qais Naim Jassim, he's scratching his foot in the ground, and he's on top of the hole. And Bam Bam and them recognized it, pulled him off, dug it up, pulled it up, and there was Saddam Hussein. So I hope I don't kill your book sales. So essentially, that was my entire tour in Iraq. It was very exciting. It was very surreal. And I was just really proud to be with that team of guys and get the opportunity to do my job. But with that being said, I would like to open up the floor to any questions. Yes, ma'am.
Since obviously you're a Chinese scholar and do not speak Iraqi, were you ever concerned about whether the interpretations you were getting were correct?
You worry about the details of the interpretations. Once you initially start, you've got your interpreter, and you can tell by the pace and the length of messages statements that I make. When you watch them and the length and distance and speed, if they copy you, and you know the possible reactions of your prisoner. If I get a reaction that couldn't have come from what my statement was, I would have questions with that. July, August, a little bit of a problem. October, November, December, you don't even know he's there. I mean, you're smoking it, just quick pace. And I also had the benefit that I could use my other senses to try to evaluate my prisoner while the translation piece was going on. So I tried to use that to my advantage. Yes, sir.
What lessons did you learn from your on-the-job interrogation
activities, and were you able to pass those on to the Pentagon, so that the techniques that you learned, which you said were useless, are now changed so that we do interrogate more positively and more efficiently?
Yeah, the main thing that I learned was that these individuals, when I capture them, guilty ones, the ones that are involved in the insurgency, their main claim is that, hey, I was at home asleep, I'm not in the military, I had no evidence against them. Now, the benefit is they're going to come into me with that innocent attitude. And I always go with this dumb attitude of, oh, I just need to ask you some questions. I'm sure you're innocent. So what's your name? How long you been? Let's get you out of here. And they're very excited because they're looking going, I can talk my way out of this goofball. Then I'm going to spend a couple hours and get them to create a platform, which is their life, of social networks. And if there's one individual they want to hide that they know, but the rest of their life is their wife and kids, they're going to pull that one individual out of their life. And they think they can do it easily. But what they don't understand is in social networking, we all have timelines and jobs and activities and vehicles and careers, and all those things overlap. So you may pull this guy out of your life, but when I have asked you a gazillion different questions at different angles, it pops up right in front of me. He's trying to hide. And most individuals, I have no idea what they could tell me, but they're going to take me to what they're hiding. And that's a technique that was not taught to me. I do go around, I do teach that. Matter of fact, I just returned from London last week and was teaching interrogation to the British military. I was sent by General Alexander, this obviously December 2003, from January 04 till April 04, I went around the country, around the world, briefing and teaching interrogations, and I still continue to do that today. Yes, next question.
Yes, hi, thank you very much for speaking to us this evening. I'd like to know your opinion on closing. I'd like to know your opinion on the closing of Guantanamo Bay, the prison, when we know that several prisoners that have been released have already gone back and committed terrorist activities.
Can I get one of those? Yeah. Mobile microphones, because this is the most I've stood still in 6 years. Okay, it's a great question. It's extremely important to what we're, our image across the world. But I think there are two different issues. One is, what do you do with the criminals that we have? And it's an extremely difficult question, one that has many layers to it, because now we have to define, what are they? Are they criminals of war? Are they terrorists? Because if they're criminals of war, they can stay in our possession. If they're terrorists, they've got to go in front, they've got to have a trial. They have to. And then, do you send them back to their country? And if the country doesn't want them, then where do we put them? And we haven't tried any of them. And what war are they criminals of? Because that's the easiest thing, if they were just war criminals. What war? But even the deadliest Japanese soldiers and German soldiers, they were eventually released when the war was over. And to who? So you have to ask all those questions of what to do with them. At no point I don't feel we should ever release the ones we're certain have committed those crimes. Now, the second point is Guantanamo Bay being a platform for collecting intelligence via interrogators. I don't want to go there. I don't want to talk to prisoners who have been in prison for 7 years. There's much better and fresher interrogation. And if that platform of intelligence is creating a negative image of the United States worldwide, shut it down. Shut it down, no problem. I'm gonna get my intel from a fresher prisoner in a newer war or more recent intelligence. Because those guys, their information is old news and it's not worth it. But that doesn't mean shut them down and let them go. What to do with them is really the toughest question.
A lot of countries want us to shut it down, but they don't want the prisoners.
So what do you do? I mean, I think it's a question, it doesn't matter what side of the political, where you stand in politics. I think it is an extremely difficult question for our administrators and our leaders. It's going to be the toughest thing because we've never had to face it before. We don't have an example of this in the past. So it's going to take one of our leaders to take a stance and implement it. But if they go free, I'm certain the next bin Laden is in that prison. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You told us about how a lot of the things that proved to be successful for you, you kind of improvise. But were there some aspects of your training that were particularly valuable or skills that you learned in advance that did prepare you well for your success?
Yes, sir. And Doctor, I think you understood the book probably as clearly as anybody, having just talked to you for just a few minutes. But I don't want to say I didn't learn to become an interrogator in interrogation training by the military. I learned to successfully interrogate in this type of battlefield on my own. And the reason I say that is because that school teaches you wonderful methodologies for questioning, how to ask interrogatives versus, the who, what, where, why, when, what else, what other, versus yes, no, did, is, are, and then how to report it. And most importantly, if somebody asks me, did they prepare you for this? I think, if anybody's been to Ranger School, I went in 1995 and I failed 3 times before I eventually made it. It's a 72-day school and I was there for 168 days. And what I learned was that I had lived my life just following the path of what I thought was least resistance. Just put your head down and you'll make it through. But at that school, I realized I'm never going to pass unless I stand up and tell myself and find a way to succeed. Sometimes you have to stand up and go, I don't know, I can't rely on fate. I've got to do it myself. And I think if you look at the United States military, there's thousands of young men and young women who have that attitude. And they did teach me that. But as an interrogator in Iraq in 2003, and I went back for another tour in 2005, you cannot use the methodologies that you're taught at the school that I went to in 1999 and succeed out there. That being said, my school was 8 weeks. The school now is 18 weeks and is adapted to the new battlefield. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question about, have you found that cross-cultural
nonverbal cues when you're interrogating, talking to someone, are those nonverbal cues fairly consistent cross-culturally, or do you notice little changes?
I think the unintentional nonverbal cues do cross cultures, but I think there's differences in cultures. There's two different cultures. There's a culture of an Iraqi citizen in Iraq who's free, and there's a culture of an Iraqi citizen who's a prisoner. Those are two different cultures. Because you learn to become a prisoner. You learn how to act. You learn, and they learn from each other. There's a different culture from Iraq in 2003 and in Iraq in 2009. And the American influence and war and new leadership and non-Saddam has created different cultures. But most of the non-verbal communication does cross the cultures. But what I tell people when they're talking about nonverbal communication is that some of them can be culturally learned. You would never see an Iraqi male sit like this because they don't ever show the bottoms of their feet. It's extremely rude. So you won't see that, whereas some individuals cross their body parts to protect themselves as a sign of deception. So some movements are taught, put in the society, but the ones that are completely subconscious, I do believe, cross the cultures. Yes, sir.
I'm going to guess that the interrogation methods that you used successfully in Iraq, which we congratulate you, would have been tried and would have failed in Afghanistan in trying to locate the hidden Osama bin Laden. Bin Laden. Yeah, what do you attribute the difference to?
I think the most difficult, I would absolutely use the same methodologies. The most difficult part about finding Saddam versus finding bin Laden is that Saddam Hussein was in the same country as the soldiers who were looking for him. Now, we were given hundreds and eventually thousands of leads of where Saddam could have been. And what I tried to do was track all of them to see which ones I could throw off the table. Okay, this is junk, this is junk, this is junk. And it leaves now the very few which are extremely difficult to pursue. But when every lead for bin Laden stops at the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan, you can't throw any of the leads off the table. So now you're sitting with hundreds and thousands and millions of leads, 99.9% of which are clutter, and you can't shuffle out, you can't take out the trash to focus on the good ones. I truly think that is the most, but if it was in the same, even the same environment that we have in Afghanistan, we have an international border, I would absolutely still use the same techniques, because you're talking about learning about social networks, which allows you to go after individuals who aren't on the run. And it's a lot easier to find a guy who doesn't know he's wanted than to go the ones who are, and they have the same information as the bad guys. Yeah.
I have a two-part question. Did we give out any reward money? And were you there for the trial or his execution, or do you know anybody that was?
First part of your question, not a single dime was given to Muhammad Ibrahim. He was a prisoner and gave up that money as a prisoner. So that's $25 million on the house. There was a significant reward given to one of the individuals who was a key player, and we told him, take the money, we don't ever want to see you again. And he said, you won't. I was not there for the execution of Saddam. I didn't feel I had a role in that. I had my mission, and there were other people who were more prepared to kind of handle that mission. I don't know anyone who was involved with his hanging. Yes, sir.
Were you under orders to take him alive, or did the man who captured him make a decision about whether to kill him or to take him alive?
Sir, the mission statements, it's called kill capture. First objective is to go with capture unless any, at some point during the mission there's an imminent threat. Yes, ma'am.
I also have a two-part question. What were you authorized as a staff sergeant interrogator in terms to offer your confidential informants and some of the other ones that you brought in for interrogation? And then the second part is, how much contact, or have you had any contact with any of the folks that provided you information during that time period?
Okay, you might have to remind me about the second question, because your first question was quite complicated, in that confidential informants don't get interrogated. Confidential informants are individuals who have chosen to come talk to me, and they can leave any point they want. I dealt with what I call low-level informants, come to the front gate, want to provide information. I have had a prisoner, he and I determined that he should be freed, but he wants to help. I'll let him go home, and then maybe he provides more information later. I really can't provide him anything other than I promise to do my best to take their information and us eliminate the problem together. That's about all I can provide to him. I make very few promises, and I think I've always kept them. I know any promise I made to a prisoner of, if you give me this, you go home, they always go home. You give me this, and the main reason is they're at a level in the insurgency. If they give me the guy above them was what got them involved. So if I get the guy above them, I know now if I let them go, they're not a threat, which is really why we have them. I mean, somebody else is going to convict them of crimes committed. Then you have to look at what's their involvement and how could they, it's like some kid who gets on drugs and you put him in a drug rehab. Well, the worst part is if you send him back just to the same society. You got to change his society. And so I would explain to the prisoner, if you help me wipe out the guys above you that are getting you involved, I don't need you anymore.
I don't have a question, I have a statement.
Thank you from the bottom of all of our hearts.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Thank you. And I would like to say one last thing. I have two little boys. They're 6 and 7, and I hope they grow up to be men. And I may not go back to Iraq. I may not go after Afghanistan, and I hope I don't have to go to any other future wars. But for any of you all who have family and friends who are out there, you know anybody who's fought or is fighting, just on my behalf and my son's behalf, for which they're fighting for, I just want to tell you thank you, and please tell them thank you. Thank you, Ambassador.